Welcome to the Pain-Free Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Jones. I am a certified personal trainer, and I'm here to help you achieve your fitness goals without pain. In each episode, I'll share tips and strategies that will help you stay safe and pain-free while you're working out. I'll also interview experts in the field of fitness and pain management. So if you're ready to learn how to stay active and pain-free, then subscribe to the Pain-Free Athlete Podcast today. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Pain-Free Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Dana Jones, and today I am joined by a very special guest, Charlie Merrill. He is a physical therapist and the founder of Merrill Performance in Boulder, Colorado. He has synthesized treatment for mind and body stuff over 25 years. And in his practice, he combines traditional hands-on manual therapy and movement with the novel mind-body approach to treat a wide range of clients, including some of the best runners, cyclists, rock climbers, and CrossFitters in the world. Welcome, Charlie.
Thank you. And sometimes it is a wild range, not just a wide range of symptoms. Some days it feels that way for sure.
Yes, it does. I'm enjoying my life here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talking with you. You and I have already talked about how working with athletes, talking about this in the context of sports and athletes is one of my favorite things to do. And I think it's a really important audience. So thank you for making the space for this.
I appreciate it. So you are a physical therapist, and how are you different than every other physical therapist on the planet?
Gosh, that's a really big question. When I started Merrill Performance, maybe about 12 years ago, one of the reasons I made that switch is because I didn't feel like I was able to provide the type of treatment care that I wanted to in an insurance-based system. And part of creating my own business and almost like exiting the traditional insurance-based model is that I had to create a niche product. I had to create something unique that stood out from what everybody else in the space was doing. And this is actually before I got into mind body work. So I actually ran my business out of a CrossFit gym for about a decade. And one of the first things I did was A, I had more time to work with the people I worked with. And B, I sort of bridged that gap between traditional PT and like return to high level sport, return to function. So I brought the CrossFit model into my treatment. I had a lot more time to problem solve and to connect with people and to develop relationships. And I think that felt like the most important part to me, honestly, was having the time and space to really listen and to get to know people. And of course, integrating other higher level functional movements and having time to apply manual therapies was really valuable. That sort of led into maybe the next step, which was realizing that something's missing. As much as I've differentiated and I feel like I can do a pretty good job for people, there were some athletes that just weren't responding the way that I would have expected them to. And that's what led me to dive deeper and discover that there was all this emerging pain neuroscience that has really paradigm shifted, continues to paradigm shift the way we conceptualize and treat all types of pain in all types of people, not just athletes, but especially athletes.
So how did you get into the space of Dr. Sarno and Howard Schubiner? What was the attraction to it as opposed to any other type of theory?
So I had a herniated disc in my low back really early in my life when I was in my late teens and early 20s. And that I guess I'll call it an injury because it was a pretty significant herniation at the time with all the red flag findings that would warrant surgery. Being young and active at the time, I got a number of opinions from physicians. One of them wanted to do surgery, of course. It was the obvious play. And the other one was more conservative and said, hey, I really want you to read John Sarno's book. You're young, you're already feeling a little bit better. Let's ride this out. Let's give it some time. And this is before physical therapy school. And that book for me, I would say I got the book cure in a way because it really resonated for me. It made me feel safe and I believed it, right? I mean, belief is the most important predictor of outcome. And so 6 months later, I got better. And I always wondered, what happened to that disc? I wonder where it went. So for 20 years, until we had the research, the findings that herniated discs heal themselves, I always wondered where it went. Why am I better? And here I am at 50 and I really haven't had back pain since. So that set me up going to physical therapy school, I think in the back of my mind to understand that the psychological and social factors in people's lives affect their pain, even though I wasn't explicitly treating those things. I think I understood that safety was a really important message to share with people, that this sort of hopefulness and positivity and optimism about outcomes and about the ability of the body to heal is something that I always carried with me as I was treating clients. But it wasn't until like 10 years into my practice where I started to be like, something's missing, something's off, people aren't responding. And I had this like light bulb moment of like, John Sarno, I wonder if anyone's taken John Sarno's work and like developed it clinically. Because as you remember, he's brilliant, but it was somewhat rudimentary when it comes to like,
Yes.
how do we treat this? So as fortune would have it, I went to the TMS wiki and I was immediately connected with Dr. Howard Schubiner. Like of all the people, right, in the world that I could have connected with, he was like my entry point. And that was it. I mean, that was what sort of lit me on fire as far as like, this is it. This is what's missing. This is absolutely, synthesizing these things is absolutely what I need to do in my career.
I love that because there is, think in traditional training, there is this belief that things need to be cause and effect. There has to be something wrong. And especially when you're dealing with bodily issues, there is that. And athletes especially, I did this and it caused X. And you kind of went a little outside the box. And so I guess one of my questions is, how did your clients take to it? Like, how do you figure out how to interweave it into your practice? Because you're dealing with some interesting, when you look at, the list of people that you're working with, there's some type A personality, left brain kind of people.
Yeah, 100%. And I consider myself that way. You might consider yourself that way. So I relate to that
I'm working on it.
personality type. Yeah, I relate to that personality type for sure. And, it can get people into trouble. But like any personality trait, there's an important sort of strong part of that that's really useful and helpful and functional. And then there's another part of that that really holds people back. So I don't like to make that always a bad thing. It's how we get anything done in our
Well, it makes
lives.
you a good athlete. I mean, if
Makes you
you're
a
a
good
rock
athlete.
climber or if you're a cyclist and you're looking at all this data and you're using this information to improve in performance, then why not?
Yeah, totally. So, at first when I started doing this, a lot of people were taken off guard, right? I felt really confident in what I was doing. And I did my best to meet people where they were, right? But I was excited about it. And so I made lots of mistakes early on. I turned lots of people off because I was so enthusiastic and they were coming in totally, not expecting what I was about to drop on them. And of course, like any clinician, as we practice, we get better and better at that over time, learning how to meet people where they are and how to introduce this and plant seeds and recognizing that some people are ready to go, they're ready to hear this, and other people simply are not, and that's okay. And so that's gotten easier for me over the course of time, let's just say. And now people seek me out for that, so it's a lot easier. And when I'm training clinicians, I have to sort of remind them of that. Like, at first you're going to have to ask a lot of permission. You're going to have to be really careful the way you introduce this stuff. But I also remind them that this is the science, right? This is the trend. This is where we're going. This isn't my opinion. This isn't some woo-woo crazy idea, right? We have decades of science from multiple fields all coalescing to sort of move us in this direction. And I want not only clinicians, but I want athletes to be able to trust that, regardless of where they are in their journey, in their belief at that point. So I feel like my role is to introduce this and help support people in kind of opening up to this through curiosity. That's what I try to curate in people.
So you mentioned that you are training practitioners. How did that come about?
Well, when I connected with Dr. Schubiner, who's been an incredible mentor, and I've been so fortunate to have so many clinicians across multiple disciplines that have been mentors in the mental health space, physicians. Once I connected with him and I took his training, I was so excited about the opportunity that I reached out to him and suggested that we take the course that he and Alan Gordon had built and make it more of a specialty course for my colleagues, because I knew that it was going to resonate more for them if they were learning it in the context of what they do. If we're talking about manual therapies and how that fits, if we're talking about movement, corrective exercise and how that fits, that's not going away, nor should it. In fact, I'm a real big advocate for both of those things. But I knew that for my colleagues to accept and adopt this, it would have to be more of a synthesis rather than a dualistic binary where it's either this or this, right? And so I spend a lot of time living in the gray with my clients and also talking about that with clinicians, because I think that's just the reality of how these things present.
I love that so much because it is the more people that get this information and you, like me, are kind of on the ground level. I mean, you're more prescriptive because a lot of times doctors will say, this is what's wrong with you. You should go to PT, where I see things right out of the gate, where somebody comes to me and says, oh, I did this and I want to work
Early,
on.
early
Right,
in the
and
process.
there's not a lot of training available for people like me because I noticed in the beginning when I was looking at this, because at first I got it, and like you said, you're super excited about getting this information, and it totally makes sense, especially if you're a left brain kind of person. It really, with the science, with all the different studies and everything that I've seen, it just is a eureka moment. Why hasn't anyone else used this? Because this is so much simpler. And of course, we know all the reasons, and most of it is that we don't like change, but you have this ability. And so I wanted to share this. And there was nothing on, because I'm so ground level, the personal training, right? There was nothing in that realm. If I wanted to be a mental health professional, if I wanted to be a physical therapist, sure, but it was definitely like on my level. And that's what kind of drew me to SERPA, was because Georgie had opened everything up to everybody. And I've
Hmm.
noticed that since you've kind of, I don't know, grown in the area, now you have opened it to, your training is open to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much anybody who wants to come and learn this. Yeah, I think it's geared more towards clinicians that are in a clinical setting, right? That are currently treating sort of more in a biomedical model, that are using manual therapies and movement to try to help people problem solve through their symptoms. But yeah, I mean, anyone's welcome, because we've even had people that have been on their own pain journey come through our course, because we talk so directly about the body. And I think this is really important, that as clinicians we entertain. We don't just say, this is your brain, you know, you have primary pain or TMS or neuroplastic pain. Don't worry about your body, right? It's not the problem. But there are a lot of people, and especially athletes, like, they don't want to just ignore their body. They have to talk about the body.
Yes.
It's an important part of their what they're doing. And we don't want to neglect that it's the most incredible sensory organ through which we can feed information to the brain to create change. Like, we don't want to just cut things off here and neglect that part. So people that are on their pain journeys, I find, really want to talk about their body. They want to understand their body. They want to know why what the physician or what the other physical therapist said may not have been the complete story, may not have been the complete truth, because they have all these things that they've heard and read and seen from Google and wherever else going through their mind. And it's just not possible, I think, for people just to say, okay, I'll just ignore that. I'll just put that away and trust you, doctor, and move on. So I really like to make the space and the time for people to be able to address their concerns about their body and debunk myths and whatever else they need.
Well, and as a client, I appreciate that because I know I don't know, third time that I heard about this was from a physical therapist.
Mm,
And I had so much anxiety around movement that it was really difficult for me after, I got a cortisone shot, all these things, and the things weren't working. And
mm,
he's all, well, cortisone does work.
yeah.
Like, if there's a
If
true
it's meant to
injury,
work, if it's meant to work,
yes,
it should work. Yeah.
it work. And, 2 weeks later, you should not be feeling pain in that area. And I got that, but his manner and how he spoke to me and really made me do a deep dive into where my feelings were coming from. And he used Lorma Mosley's Tame the Beast. And I guess I want to say my medical group has a connection of, I guess there's a little training that you can do, and then it has the little snippets of the video that you can watch. And that was probably what solidified some belief in
Mm,
me. Not 100%, but some belief, because I couldn't understand, of course I went to him for a hamstring injury, but I couldn't understand why when I was doing shoulder presses that I was getting migraines. And, even though I have torn rotator cuff and all that other stuff, like that didn't hurt, but my head hurt. And so we talked about it and we started working on, gradually introducing me to returning to exercise in a safe manner. And that still is a struggle for me and I don't know why, for whatever reason. And before we started recording, one of the things that I shared with you was that the fact that last week I bought a new truck, and leading into that process, I got this insane jaw pain to the point where I couldn't open my mouth and everything. It was so sore. And so there's a part of me that goes, dude, this is bullshit. Like it's nothing.
You
You
called
know,
bullshit on yourself.
yes, and I still don't believe myself. Right. That's that part of, I
Interesting.
don't know where that comes from, but knowing, right? It's like you didn't get hit in the jaw. It's not dislocated, because if it was
Right.
dislocated, you wouldn't be able to talk or, whatever, those kinds of things. And there's only certain times that it bothers you. And it's generally when I was like on the computer searching for the right model of truck that I wanted.
Ah,
And I'm knowing all this, and yet still these symptoms kind of pop up. And
sure.
so I want you to kind of, if you can, cure me. No, explain to me like why that still, like, why is it so hard sometimes for athletes, especially, to kind of let go of the anxiousness or fear that is behind moving?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're so conditioned from a young age. I mean, my kids aren't going to be this way because they're learning this really early, but we're so conditioned to the idea that pain equals something wrong with the body. It's such a knee-jerk reaction, right? It's
Hmm.
like 2 + 2 = 4. It's just really simple math for our brain and our nervous system to make that connection. And so I think that that's probably the hardest reflex to interrupt. What you just shared is incredible evidence, right? When cortisone isn't working, when physical therapy isn't working, when all the things you're doing with the best intentions aren't getting the results that you expect, that's the best evidence that you're kind of barking up the wrong tree. And I feel like the brain and nervous system does us a favor sometimes by trying to communicate that to us, that you go do some group of exercises that's meant to work and it actually makes you worse, or it doesn't make you better. That's information, right? That's telling us something. So I would say in your case, buying this truck, I like to think of pain as a barometer. Pain is normal. This podcast is called The Pain-Free Athlete, but the reality is that, like, not many athletes are pain-free. I just went for a longer run than I was used to the other day. And during the run, I sort of caught up with some guys that were running pretty fast, and I just tried to hang with them and chat with them for a bit. And I was just so sore for the next 48 hours. My legs were just wrecked. And I see this as just part of being a runner and doing something hard and part of the adaptation process. That's the
Hmm.
kind of pain I'm choosing. And so I think I sort of hold that differently than if pain kind of came out of nowhere and I didn't know why it happened. That's not the pain I'm choosing. That's a different kind of pain. It has more fear associated with it. But this is all to say that the goal isn't necessarily to be pain-free, because pain is a protector. It's normal. It's supposed to come and go. It's meant to alert us of something. And in the case of you shopping for a truck, I'm curious your reflections, if you took the time after you reassured yourself to say, there's nothing wrong with my jaw, but what does this mean about this purchase? Am I frustrated I can't find the right model? Am I subconsciously worried that this isn't the right purchase for me? I'll ask you, I don't want to make up stories. Did you get a
No,
sense that,
you had it.
okay, which
It was
one?
trying to find the right model, and then it was also obviously the economic,
Yeah,
stuff behind it, because
yeah,
it's a big purchase and
it
it's not
is.
something that you do every day.
Totally. And on one hand, you're probably really excited about it, right? Because buying
Yes.
something like that's thrilling, but we know that the neurophysiology of excitement is not that much different from the neurophysiology of fear, right? And anxiety. So those two things share a lot in common. So you could be doing something really exciting, but there's still stress associated with that change. You said before that change is hard for a lot of us, and athletes are not exempt from that at all.
Well, even in the language that we use, and that's, I think, one of the challenging things for me, is because, I've been an athlete since 6, doing things, and there's certain language that you pick up through training, through being exposed to other athletes. I pinched
Kids,
it. Right,
friends,
coaches, I
yeah.
pinched a nerve, there's all these things, and that language change has been difficult, and at least I'm more well-behaved, because in the beginning, when somebody would say something, I would immediately correct them, and then I realized that that wasn't making me very popular, especially around I pinched a nerve or those types of things, because of the fact that that's not what you're feeling. And also you can't really, you can kill a dinner party real quick by being a jerk by people.
Yeah, don't
So
do that. Don't do that.
yeah. So, well, there's the excitement, like you talked about. It's
Yeah, you
you
want
see
people to
this
know.
information, right? And you don't want people to suffer. And that's my big thing, is that even for my clients, and I see how pain has changed their lives, or how their lives have become smaller as a result of what's going on. Before, they would go on rides and now they're not going on rides, or whatever it may be. And for an athlete, that social isolation can be debilitating on so many different levels. So
Mhm.
it's something to kind of look at, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you and I, Dana, we're in so many ways we're swimming upstream because the mainstream narrative, if you look at Instagram or YouTube or, anyone in the fitness space, anyone in the athlete space, the dominant message is something's wrong with your body. You can fix this with strength and flexibility or other modalities or manual therapies or whatever. And that's the mainstream. I mean, that's what gets the most eyeballs. And so when an athlete comes in and they're having some pain during the taper phase leading up to a race that they're really excited about, the first thing they're going to do is say it must have been that last long training run, or it must have been that last block of really heavy intensity and volume. And it's such a stretch for them to shift to the fact that there's anxiety about this race and their family's going to be there and they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves, right? They're excited about the race, but there's a lot of uncertainty about that event. And I think most athletes would prefer that it be something with their body than it be something with their psychology or these other social factors, even though treating the body doesn't tend to work that well most of the time.
Well, wouldn't it be wonderful if it did? It doesn't. But yeah, it's as you say that, I think about a lot of the athletes that I've worked with. And for here, this is a triathlon area and a cycling area. And that is notorious. The taper and some kind of thing comes up, plantar fasciitis, some kind of hamstring tightness or lower back pain or something in that realm usually shows up before the official freak out, which is I'm a week away and I have to do this.
Yeah, and I want athletes to understand that as their training comes down, right? They're bored, they're not doing the thing they love, they're not as distracted, they're not as immersed. They have more time to think, right? That there's more spacious time. And we know that as physical sensation goes down, as the pain of training goes down, emotion is going to go up and vice versa.
Mm.
This is why athletes like to train and exercise, why it helps them manage their anxiety, because as the physical discomfort goes up, emotions go down, right? The emotions stay low. We can keep them buried. We can keep them subverted and ignore them. But as soon as the training volume goes down, suddenly those emotions start to rise up and you can't ignore them anymore. And they're going to express as physical sensations in your body because that's what emotions do. That's what emotions are. They're a chemical expression through your physical body. And I think it's really important for athletes to know, what a great superpower if you're in the middle of a race, right? And you're having some pain come up. Instead of it threatening to sabotage your race because you're worried something's wrong with your body, what if it was just you acknowledging that, you're in the middle of this really intense race and you need to just attend to what's coming up, breathe through it, reassure yourself, give yourself a little pep talk and get on with the day.
Yeah, that would be great. Although we have noticed this trend toward, I guess, torturing ourselves for longer periods of time. Ultra
Yeah.
running has exploded. I wasn't doing full Ironmans because I don't ever want to run a marathon, but I was doing half Ironmans. And I know a lot of people, especially for me, I thought I had a knee thing, and I rode 56 miles on a bike, hyper focused about the knee thing. And that's a long time
Brutal.
to be on
Yeah,
a bike,
totally.
concentrating on that. But so there is this weird trend we're heading toward, to torturing ourselves for longer periods of time. So it
Yes.
kind of just fits into that. So I don't know. Well, you're in Colorado, so you're dealing with
We
all
have a
kinds of
lot
ultra
of
runners.
100%. Yeah, I've seen this rise in ultra endurance sports. I mean, you can't even find a short triathlon anymore, hardly, right? It's half
Yes,
Ironman or Ironman compared to when I was doing triathlon in my 20s and 30s. It's changed a lot. And I think ultra endurance athletes benefit the most from knowing this stuff. I mean,
for
they sort
sure.
of go into these events knowing that they're going to have discomfort in their body or digestive stuff. And so they almost need this information more than other athletes because otherwise it threatens to sabotage the whole race. I have a client who was training for his first 100-mile running race, and he was dealing with some sort of knee IT band kind of pain. And I saw him once, and he got to the start line, and the first like 60 miles he was fine, and then he went mile 60, his knee pain came back, and luckily, because we talked, he knew what was going on, and he was able to work through that for the next, I don't know, 10, 15 miles. He just sort of, he reassured himself and he kept going. After 15 miles, this is now mile 75, his pain just went away. And he finished the last 25 miles. That was the best part of his whole race. He ran the fastest in the last 25 miles. And he was thrilled, of course. Like, what does that tell us about this knee pain, right? That it comes on at mile 60 and then
Right.
it goes away at mile 75? Like, that's not an injury. That's not how injuries behave. And without going into the details of his story and kind of what was coming up for him at that point, doesn't it make sense that that would be kind of a tough point in the race where you have a long way to go? You're through the halfway point, you have a long way to go. And psychologically, you're doubting and you're unsure. This is on one hand the reason people sign up for these events, because they're so challenging. And on the other hand, why they can sometimes, people's races get sabotaged, and
But
they don't need to.
there is that line. And I know for marathoners, it's around mile 19, 20
Yeah.
that they start to notice things. And part of it, I'm sure, is nutrition, because I believe that there's no way to fuel your body properly. We can get as close as we can get.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, there's digestive issues. There's other things going on. It could be a temperature thing, especially for runners, right? If they're running in 40-degree temperature, then they're golden. But once it starts creeping above 50, then things start to get uncomfortable for them, just because of the amount of energy they're expending and body heat. So, everybody has a line, I guess, they find that line. And it's obviously the mental aspect that drives you through to be able to finish. And
The brain is always the governor, right? From a physiology perspective, it's calling the shots about when nutrition is going to shut you down or when temperature is going to shut you down.
Yeah. Because I definitely, like, for me, I know, like, the most dramatic I've ever been is when I screwed up my nutrition somehow. And it's usually because you're so terrified before the race that your preloading sucks, and then it just there's a whole bunch of things that go kind of sideways.
Yeah, I think there are all these ways athletes can set themselves up for success, and I think it's interesting. There's so many different ways to do that. And I said earlier in the podcast that belief is such an important predictor of outcome when it comes to pain. I feel like with athletes, belief also is going to be the most important predictor of outcome when it comes to preloading, nutrition, warming up, right? What you're wearing, like all of these factors are important, mostly because the athlete believes they're important. Not exclusively, but that's, I think, an undervalued piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we are athletes.
Mm-hmm.
So you use a term which I love, and you call it unlearning. And we do that in my educational side of my life.
You're a teacher.
I'm a teacher. I'm a high school teacher. And we use a educational philosophy that's different than everything else. It seems like I'm out there every aspect of my life.
You're a Renaissance woman. We know this.
I'm on the edge. But we were trying to explain our philosophy to people, and people weren't getting it. And so eventually we realized that the term unlearning needed to happen. Like, our students needed to unlearn their educational experience because of the fact that they were used to the teacher being the expert in the room, and that all information came from them, and then I'm supposed to believe it and then barf it back out on a test and do all that stuff, and then you give me a good grade, and then I get to go to a college. You're using unlearning in a different manner, and I would love for you to explain, because I know that you're doing some education courses that are coming up, and how are you teaching unlearning in your aspect?
Yeah, good question. I mean, first of all, I'll give Dr. Schubiner credit for that name. That's sort of how he branded his website. His book, Unlearn Your Pain, I think is an excellent resource for people. This came from the idea that symptoms, right, pain and other symptoms, can be learned, that the nervous system actually latches on to a symptom. And at some point, even if there was an injury, the way the brain and nervous system is acting changes. And the parts of the brain that light up in chronic symptoms that have been there, say, longer than 3 months, is really different. And those brain areas are more associated with learning and meaning and emotion. And so from an education perspective, we want people to understand that all pain is real, but the reason this pain is here now isn't because you're injured anymore. It's because your brain has learned it. And now it's running it almost as a habit, like any skill that you would learn in your life, on repeat. And so the goal is not to fix your body necessarily, although working on the body can be helpful, as I said before. The goal is to change your brain's perception of safety and danger, is sometimes the easiest way to say it. But we're trying to get your brain to unlearn this neural pathway, we call it, or neural circuit, some people call it. And we're trying to replace that with something different. So one example would be, when people have pain, naturally they get very focused on it. It takes a lot of attention. They're thinking about it a lot. So essentially they're practicing it like they would be practicing a skill that they wanted to learn, like the piano or learning to type or whatever. And the more you practice anything, the better
It's
you're going to get
frightening.
at it, right? And so conceptually, what we want people to do is to recognize that, yes, the pain is real, but it's not something we want you practicing anymore. So how can we get you to shift your attention to something else? When it's there, let's use pain reprocessing therapy, somatic tracking, polyvagal strategies, other things so that you can reduce your fear in the presence of that pain or those symptoms. But then let's sort of recognize that we don't want to keep practicing it. We don't want to strengthen that learning, those neural pathway connections. We want to do something else. And movement, of course, is a great something else to start practicing to prove to the brain and nervous system that you're okay. That's what we want the brain and nervous system to learn, that movement is safe, that movement is healthy, movement is life, whatever.
Hmm.
Did I sort of answer your question?
Oh, yeah, no, I love that.
Okay.
That worked.
Long-winded
Well,
way.
because it's a big thing, and I didn't really think about that, but we do become so focused on finding a resolution, right? And I think that's just how our brains are built, especially if you're more left-leaning or if you're just that typical personality of there's a problem, I want to solve it. And for this, a pain issue is a solving kind of thing, and unlearning, I think, makes more sense. Is that, you've learned it this way, so now we need to let all that go, and this is the proper way to soothe. And I think that's a lot of stuff, because especially when you're doing those lonely sports, the running, even cycling for long distances, you are alone,
Mm,
least alone in your thoughts for some. I mean, if you're a
hmm.
real good cyclist, then you're in a peloton or whatever. But for the most part, you are alone on those training rides, and there's a lot of activity that can kind of happen. And so finding something else to occupy the brain as opposed to focusing on the knee pain or the ankle pain or whatever
Yeah, for
somebody may
sure.
feel.
And I always struggle with the term healing. That word is thrown around a lot, but I think it conjures for athletes images of damage and injury and things that are not right with the body. So I feel like, unlearning is an alternative way to think about it. We're not looking for your body to heal. We're looking for your brain and nervous system to change through that process of unlearning. Yeah.
It's a wonderful concept too, to know that it can change. Because I think a lot of people believe who I am is always going to be the same and it's never going to change.
Yeah, that sort of fixed mindset that gets a lot of us into trouble. But I have this conversation a lot with people. Athletes will worry that maybe neuroplasticity can't happen for me, or maybe I'm the one person for whom neuroplasticity isn't going to work. They doubt that they can do it. But I always try to harness the fact that athletes tend to be high achieving people. They're can do people. They're motivated, and so I find myself sort of being a cheerleader a lot of the time, reminding them that like neuroplasticity happens to all of us. Yes, sometimes it happens in a direction that we don't like, but luckily it can happen in the opposite direction, and that's what I want people to trust.
I love that. That's awesome. Well, thank you, Charlie. I really appreciate having you on the show. Is there anything you have coming up that you want to share, or how do we get in touch with you?
I'm not hard to find. My website is mperformance.com. It has my email and my phone number on there. I'm not hiding. Let's just say I am a one-man show, so I don't have a team of people around me, supporting me. So the good news is if you do reach out, you'll get me and not someone else. As far as what's coming up, I'm in the middle of teaching two courses right now. One is my course for athletes who are looking to overcome symptoms. I have a excellent cohort of 8 people, and we have a great time over the course of 12 weeks supporting each other in unlearning symptoms. I have another course I'm teaching with the Pain Reprocessing Therapy Center for my colleagues, physical therapists, chiropractors, acupuncturists, gym-based people that really want to sort of shift their practice model to more of a balanced mind-body approach. That's a 6-week course, and there will be another cohort sometime in the future. So those are the 2 big things I have going on right now that I'm really excited about, in addition to just, seeing clients in the clinic, which is my favorite thing to do.
That's
Thanks for
awesome.
asking.
Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate you coming.
Yeah, thanks for the conversation. We could probably go all day, but let's do it
Probably.
again sometime.
We should.
I
All
love
right.
that.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Dana.